In this lesson, we are going to learn about animation and creating motion tween. Before we do that, we need to understand what tweening means, and also we need to understand what all of the little dots are down in the timeline. If you'd like to follow along with me, you can find this file in your Chapter 5 folder, and it's named Frames Motion Tween.fla. This particular document has a few things in it already. Let's take a look at what we have and what we're going to be working with. Before we start, let's look at the properties of the document. The document here is set up to be 550 pixels wide by 400 pixels high. It also contains several layers with a lot of different objects on those layers. The very bottom layer here is basically a background image, and that's what you see right here. Let's go ahead and turn the visibility off so you can see the document size. You may notice that the background image is a little larger, and that's okay. We'll just turn the visibility back on, but let's lock this layer in place so we don't accidentally move it around. Now, if we look over at the timeline, you're going to see a series of different frames and keyframes and blank keyframes and a lot of other things, so let's talk about that. To get familiar with the timeline, you may notice this little red thing right here, right? If you grab this is called the playhead. You can always pull this playhead across the timeline to see how things are going to work in your Flash file. So as we drag this along, you are going to notice that when we are right over the gray frames, the regular gray frames, which by the way are just regular frames, they don't contain any artwork. They're just basically placeholders for the animation to last as long as it does, right? As we drag across, when our playhead is right over the gray frames, nothing really happens. But as we move across the keyframes, and keyframes are represented by this little black dot right here, that's actually where something happens. So let's start from the beginning. So we'll start here and not a lot happens until we get here, and notice that everything under this line happens at one time. So as we move along, we're going to notice our animations happen, and those are based on keyframes, okay? So keyframes, what is that? That is where your graphics are. So let's check right here and see what's on our jack layer. If we select this, it looks like something is there, but it's invisible. Let me go grab the selection tool real quick and let's check it out. Well, we see a keyframe. That means something's there, but we don't see it. Anytime that happens, what I would do is actually select the object, look in the Properties panel, and look right here under Color Effect. For this beginning object, it looks like the alpha has been turned down all the way to 0%, which makes it completely invisible. If we drag our playhead over to the right, about right here, okay, right here, the object is here again, and if we select the object and look over in the Properties panel, the Color Effect, actually it's set to none, so that means it's going to come in full display. So this object right here, the dog in the background, actually starts here at a very low visibility and comes on again here in full visibility, okay? Well, what about this little blue area right here? In older versions of Flash, to create animation, now I'm just going to pull this back and forth so you can see just this part to this part, which is Big City, right? You're going to see that the Big City graphic probably starts down here. Do you see that? Off the stage. And as we pull it across, it moves up. And this is the ending keyframe. In older versions of Flash, you had to have a beginning keyframe and an ending keyframe, and then in the middle, you designated the tween. In newer versions of Flash, this is called classic tweening, and you can still absolutely do that, but there's a better way to create motion tween now. All right, so as we drag along, we can kind of see what we have already, and we have learned about some of the effects. All right, well, let's talk about creating our own tween. You're going to notice a layer here called Motion Tween, and we are going to put in a graphic here on this blank keyframe. Blank keyframes, again, represent really where something is going to be, but it isn't there yet. Let's scroll up a little bit and look over in our library. If you notice in the library, we are going to be looking for a symbol because tweening works with symbol. You're going to see that I have a regular paw print here, and that's basically where I drew the paw print, but to use it, it had to be converted to symbols. But right here, we're going to see paw print symbol, and this is where we need to be. I'm going to make sure that I am in the right place on the timeline, and to create my first keyframe, I'm going to drag paw print symbol out onto the workspace and drop it here. All right, very good. Well, I want this paw print to move. I want it to do something. And instead of creating a classic tween, we're going to use some of the updated features and just use the newer versions of Motion Tween. So watch this. What we're going to do is right down here in the timeline, just click anywhere, actually right click, and then choose Create Motion Tween. Instead of the older blue arrow that you see for classic tween, now you're going to see just a regular blue line, and we don't really have to deal with keyframes. What we need to do is put your cursor wherever you want your tween to be, to your ending part of your tween. So let's see what we want to do about that. So maybe let's just go down a little bit here, take our paw print and move it to a different location. You are going to notice that Flash put in a little motion path for you, and instead of a keyframe, you're going to see this little black diamond. All right, let's do a little bit more of that. Let's go to another part in the timeline. And now let's move our paw print. Let's take it from here and maybe drag it to another location, and you can still see the path. And maybe let's do this one more time. Let's go to the very end right here. And now once again, let's take our paw print and drag it back, I don't know, maybe to the starting location. So now what we want to happen is when we play our animation, our paw print is going to follow this path until it gets back to the starting location. You'll see some little buttons in the bottom of the timeline. Let's click the one that says play, and we can actually see our animation take effect. I'm on a Mac today, so if I hit Command and Return, that would be Control Enter on a PC, this will play our animation. Let me do that again. The reason it went off is because, don't forget, the skyline is a little bit bigger than the screen, so it actually goes off of the screen over to the left. Just to show you that, let me close this. We'll turn the visibility off to the background. And you can see our animation starts off the stage and ends off the stage as well.